It's
okay. Oh, he's saying, yeah.
Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our morning song, Here We Have Gathered. The words to the hymn are available on the screen, and after singing, please remain standing to recite our covenant. I'd like to ask Emily Demarest to come up and light the chalice, please. Please join us now in reciting our covenant. The words appear on the screen. Enriched by our differences and joined together, meaning we covenant with ourselves and each other to seek truth in a spirit of love, to strive for justice, and to serve others with a joyful heart. Thank you, Emily. Good. Please be seated. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Delaware County, to everyone here in the sanctuary and to our friends on Zoom. And a special welcome to anyone who is visiting our congregation for the first or the first several times. No matter who you are, no matter who you love, no matter where you are welcome here this morning. My name is Ruth Hendry, and I am serving as your worship associate this morning. I am so very pleased to be serving alongside our guest minister, the Reverend Libby Smith, who I've known for a long time. And she was like 9, and I was 12-ish. And also serving with Bob Rowland and Gabby Sachs, who will be providing the music. Members of our tech team, Don Sloat, Rob Sartain, Patrick Stiegel, and our online host, Rich Cairncross, and all of our hospitality members. If you are viewing this service on Zoom, please remember that you can activate closed captioning if that is helpful to you. And if you'd like to talk with others after the service, there will be a virtual coffee hour. Just stay logged in and you will be invited to a breakout room. If you are attending worship in person, please join us for coffee and light refreshment in Fellowship Hall. It is truly a joy to welcome the Reverend Libby Smith, a frequent guest to our congregation. Reverend Libby was ordained in 1992 and has served both as a parish minister and a chaplain. Now that she's retired from congregational work, her spouse describes her as minister without portfolio, but she sees her work as a part-time patchwork minister of trying to say yes, made up mostly of guest preaching and rites of passage. We are happy to welcome Reverend Libby back to our pulpit this morning. Each Sunday, we gather in community, carrying whatever emotions we are experiencing. Your spirit may be lifted with joy or brought low in sorrow. We honor those feelings by dropping stones into the bowl of water. Just as the stones are held by the water, so are all who drop them held in love by this community. Please file up the aisle by the window and exit by the center aisle. All are invited to join in this ritual. Those online can join us by chat, entering their joys or sorrows in the chat. All are welcome. Drop a final stone for the joys and sorrows held by those online and for those who are unable to be with us this morning.
Would you join me in a spirit of prayer? Gracious Spirit of life, into this community where we come seeking strength and common purpose, we bring our joys, our sorrows, our hopes, and our dreams. We turn our minds and hearts toward one another in trust, giving love, seeking comfort, and celebrating together. We are part of the web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. We hold tenderly in our hearts today all those who sorrow, and our hearts sing with those who are joyful. We know that we are connected to each other, but help us to remember also that we are connected to all people and to every part of this earth home that we cherish. Calm our anxiety in these troubled times so that we may be fully present to each other and to the world around us. May we be strengthened to care for each other, to care for those beyond these walls, to work for justice and peace for all people everywhere, and to care for this beautiful and fragile earth that we all share. Amen. Let's close our prayerful time by singing together, Spirit of Life. The words will be on your screen, and following the singing, we'll settle into a shared silence for a time. The work of our congregation takes many forms within our congregation and throughout our community and the world. It is with your generous financial support that the transformative power of love takes shape in our everyday living. We gladly receive your generous donations through the Text to Give function on your smartphone. You can donate to the number provided on the screen, 610-756-8883. You can also deposit checks in the boxes at the back of the sanctuary. And thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Gabby. Good morning, my friends. So I have a story today, and this is a story that, this is Answer Mountain, and it's by Sarah Squire. And we use this story in our 4th and 5th grade class this year, and they just heard it last Sunday. So they get to hear it again, and you all get to hear it today. It's one of my absolute favorites. So a long time ago, or maybe not a long time ago, maybe just yesterday, who knows, there was a town, and it was nestled beside the side of a very tall mountain. And the people of the town loved this mountain. It protected them from storms, and the mountain was almost like a part of their community. And there were words written on this mountain, carved deep into the stone, and the words read, "The answer is no." Now, the people in the town used this mountain to help them answer questions. So when the people had a question, they would call out to the mountain, and they would read the response, which was, "The answer is no." And it was very convenient. They loved it, because it was just so comforting to have the answer right there in front of you. They never had to think about stuff. Like, it was just right there. If your kid said, "Can I have ice cream?" the answer is no. There's no arguing. It's very easy. They loved it. Until one day, old Ma Custis was trying to make dinner for her family, for Pa Custis and the 8 kids, because in their family, Ma Custis was the one who made dinner. And she could not decide what to have for dinner. Have you ever had that, where maybe you're the one making dinner and you just cannot decide what you feel like making? That's how Ma Custis felt. And so she went to the mountain, and she said, the first thing that came to mind, she said, "Should I make liver for dinner?" And fortunately, the mountain said, "The answer is no." And that was good, because everyone in Ma Custis's house hated having to eat liver for dinner. So Ma Custis said, "All right, that's good. Should I make a tofu stir fry for dinner?" And the mountain said, "The answer is no." Well, now this was concerning. All night until the sun went down, and then the sun came up again, Ma Custis asked the mountain what she should make for dinner. Should she make sushi? Should she make pancakes, spaghetti? And the answer was always no. The poor Custis family didn't even have dinner that night, because there was Ma Custis couldn't figure out what to make. The answer was always no. This went on for 3 days. Finally, Ma Custis just made liver because it was the first thing that came to mind, even though the mountain had told her no. But she said, "This is not okay." And she went to the town square, and she rang the bell, and everybody came for a town meeting. And Ma Custis said, "This is not working. The mountain only ever says no, and it's not helping. We need to have a yes sometimes." Now, the people in the town, they were not so big on change. They were not sure that this was a good idea, but they talked it through, and they thought, maybe sometimes it would be good if the mountain said yes. There was a little kid who wanted ice cream, and the mountain kept saying no, but if the mountain said yes, he could have ice cream. He thought that was a great idea. So they called in the town stone carver, and his name was Mason Sharp, and they said, "Can you change the wording on the mountain?" Now, these were words carved in a mountain. They were really, really big. And Mason Sharp said, "That is a really big job, but I guess if I stop doing all of the things that I had planned for the next 2 weeks, and if I work from sunup to sundown, I can get it done." And the people of the town said, "Great, you do that." So every day for 2 weeks, Mason Sharp went and he carved new words into the mountain. And at the end of 2 weeks, he rang the bell, and everyone came running, and he said, "Look." And the mountain now read, "The answer is yes." This is exactly what the people wanted. They were thrilled. And so Ma Custis, who started this whole thing, she got to ask the first question. And so she asked the first thing that came to her mind, which was, "Should I make liver for dinner?" And the mountain said, the answer is yes, and Ma Custis's children burst into tears. It was terrible, and Ma Custis said, but wait, I promised my family I would not make liver for dinner. They all hate it. My husband's finding a new place to eat tonight. Are you sure that I should make liver for dinner? And the mountain said, the answer is yes. Oh no, but Ma Custis said, but I promised my family. Am I supposed to break my promise? And the mountain said, the answer is yes. Really? Now this caused quite a commotion in the town. The people were not sure that this was okay. Should Ma Custis really have to break a promise just because the mountain said that she should? As the people started to argue about whether or not the mountain was right and what Ma Custis should do, the littlest Custis, under threat of having to eat liver again, said, do we really have to have only one answer? Couldn't there be more than one answer? This was unheard of in this little town. But the people thought about it, and they went back and forth, and they made a lot of pros and cons, and they discussed it, and the Custis children were thrilled, because the more discussing was the farther they had to be from eating liver. And finally, the people of the town decided that sometimes the answer is yes, sometimes the answer is no, sometimes the answer is I don't know, sometimes the answer is wait and see. So they turned to Mason Sharp, who by this point all the color had drained from his face, and they said, Mason Sharp, could you carve a new thing into the mountain? Can you write, the answer is sometimes no and sometimes yes, and sometimes wait and see and sometimes I don't know. And Mason Sharp gripped the sides of his chair and he said, well, I mean, theoretically that's possible. I could do it, but it would take a really long time, and I can't stop all these other projects I'm doing like I did before. And they said, it's okay, Mason Sharp. It's okay. Take as much time as you need. We will all know that that's what the mountain is going to say eventually. But you know what? We'll put up a sign while you're working. Take as much time as you need. We'll put up a sign, and the sign read, the answer is under construction. Thank you for listening to my story today. You can see why that's a favorite. All right, my friends, it is time for religious education. Bob is going to play our sending song. We sing it once through all together, and then the second time you hear it, our teachers will go and get ready to greet you, and the third time, our kids can join the teachers in the lobby. Thank you.
I just have to say that Chrissy is a story magician. All you have to do is give her just an inkling of what the theme might be, and she comes up with the perfect illustration. So my gratitude for that story. For the reading this morning, I'm going back in time to the 1800s. mid to late 1800s, Robert Ingersoll's essay, Why I Am an Agnostic. And this is an excerpt from that essay. Let us be honest with ourselves. In the presence of countless mysteries, standing beneath the boundless heavens sown thick with constellations, knowing that each grain of sand, each leaf, each blade of grass asks of every mind the answerless question, knowing that the simplest thing defies solution, feeling that we deal with the superficial and the relative and that we are forever eluded by the real, the absolute. Let us admit the limitations of our minds, and let us have the courage and the candor to say, we do not know.
Much of this is baffling. When breathing feels like gambling, nowhere to go but here. Things come together then fall apart. We gather up our broken hearts, and endings are just a place to start. And so we start again. We're gonna climb this ladder rung by rung. We're gonna count our blessings one by one. It's gonna take a little grace and luck, 'cause baby, it's a long way up. Baby, it's a long way up. When the days are short and the stars align, we live in time outside of time, slow dancing as the new moon shines, with you humming in my ear. We're gonna climb this ladder rung by rung. We're gonna count our blessings one by one. It's gonna take a little grace and luck, 'cause baby, it's a long way up. Baby, it's a long way up. Last night my dog sat barking at the world. Yesterday I heard the wild cranes pass. Morning came creeping in at dawn, like amber on the frosted glass. Mud sat up and looked around and wondered at the world it found, till eventually the mud laid back down, smiled and said amen. We're gonna climb this ladder rung by rung. We're gonna count our blessings one by one. It's gonna take a little grace and luck, 'cause baby, it's a long way up. Baby, it's a long way up. Baby, it's a long way up.
So I see that Gabby has the same gift with song that Chrissy has with story. Thank you, Gabby. Again, I was trying to jot down the words to that refrain in the hopes that I'll remember to circle back and quote them in the middle of the sermon somewhere. So I need to start by acknowledging that I'm a little ambivalent about being with you all this morning. Not ambivalent about seeing all of you, the part of you that I can see. Over the years, I've spent a lot of time with this congregation and have come to love it. And I know some of you better than others as individuals, but I have a powerful appreciation for you as a collective. And it's a delight to be here, to reconnect and to enjoy that feeling of community. And after all, that feeling of community for many of us took a real hit over the past couple of years. Obviously, that varied a lot from person to person because some of us have jobs that meant we had to keep showing up and being with other people even when we might have preferred to stay home and stay safe. Some of us chose to take more risks than others, choosing connection over caution. But all of us experienced, to different degrees, a changed rhythm to life and reduced options and limited connections. And now we're finding our way back. Back to community, back to relationship, back to an understanding of what normal life looks like. And for some, that's been really easy and really joyful. And for others, it's been much harder than we expected. Which brings me back to my ambivalence. Because as much as I love you guys, I'm still a little edgy about being in groups in enclosed places for extended periods of time. And increasingly, I'm realizing that that has become a minority position. We're all having different responses to the shift back to normal. Some folks are done with the pandemic. They've thrown away their masks and they're doing karaoke in crowded bars. That was the most extreme example I could think of. Slam dancing, maybe. Some folks are ready to gather with family and close friends, but continuing to mask in or avoid indoor crowds and working through a risk assessment process with each thing they decide to do or not do. And some folks are still mostly just staying home, avoiding all but necessary contact. We are not all in the same place. Now, in our household, we've got a variety of medical vulnerabilities. So I am still rocking my N95s anytime I go anywhere. And I'm really happy I found a source that has pretty colors. I can color coordinate them to my outfits. You know, I have some flowered ones, because my cloth masks were so pretty, and then they told us those weren't good enough. But increasingly, I am the only person wearing a mask in any public space where I find myself, and I've started getting looks, eye rolls. People who are done with the pandemic seem to think that I should be done with it too. I find myself feeling defensive, wanting to justify my mask, to say to anyone who gives me that look, hey, look, this isn't a political statement, and it's not a judgment about you. I'm really happy that you're ready to move on, but this is about my immune-compromised family members, so please try to understand. The pandemic has really highlighted something that has been around way longer than that, and that's the way we pigeonhole each other on the basis of very limited information. We are so good at snap judgments. Small symbols become indications of which side a person is on. Mask or no mask? American flag on the pickup truck? Hate has no home here sign in the front yard? Black Lives Matter lapel pin? Or one that says, gun rights are women's rights. I saw that for the first time yesterday. We take one look, or now that I'm hot in the fervor of baseball postseason, you know, I see the Yankees cap and I assume, oh, they must be arrogant. Because I have this idea about the Yankees being an arrogant. You know, we all have our particular things that we see and judge on the basis of. But one look and we think we know everything we need to know. Now, one of my guilty secrets, well, Rena knows. It's not a secret, Rena knows. I love reading mysteries and watching detective series on TV. And one of the reasons that I like them so much is they are so, it's like the mountain says no. It's easy to know who the good guys are and who the bad guys are and which side to be on. And that kind of certainty is very comforting. It's that feeling of knowing the answers. But that certainty is a fallacy. And in fact, one of my favorite series that I know Rena also loves, the Louise Penny novels with Inspector Gamache up in Quebec, one of the things he says to his cadets at the Sûreté is, don't believe everything you think. Think about that. Don't believe everything you think. As Chrissy's wonderful story this morning illustrated, answers are often not clear-cut. The answer is often under construction, more complicated and more nuanced than we want to acknowledge. And our work is to get beneath the code words and the symbols that seem to tell us so much about each other and look for the deeper truths. Now, I stumbled across an article recently that lifts up what a deep and urgent need this is in our larger culture right now, and offers a strategy for how to go about that hard work of going deeper. The article showed up online in the Hedgehog Review, which was new to me. I just happened to see this title as I was scrolling through something else, but it's a great site. The article is by Alan Levinovitz. He's a professor in the Philosophy and Religion department at James Madison University. And it caught my eye mainly because of the title, In Praise of Bewilderment. Because my first reaction was, finally, somebody is affirming my natural condition. Levinovitz begins his article by saying, there is hope for America's ailing soul. It draws on a standard teaching technique familiar to anyone reading these words, bewilderment. And then he goes on to describe the way he leads his students into bewilderment. He leads them to question their assumptions and to recognize the complexity of the issues that they're studying. They start out, the first example he uses is that they start out absolutely certain that science and religion are utterly incompatible ways of knowing the world. You believe in one or you believe in the other, period. They are certain of this. They might argue about which one is the better one to believe in, but they're sure you can only hold one. But he says, when someone is certain, it's very hard to learn. And then he says, so I begin with bewilderment. Are you familiar with Gregor Mendel, the 19th century Roman Catholic friar, whose mathematical acumen and love of biology gave us the earliest known laws of genetic heredity? Did you know Sir Isaac Newton wrote much more about religion and astrology, no, not astronomy, astrology, than physics? Maybe you find history dull, then consider Dr. Francis Collins, former director of the National Institutes of Health, leader of the Human Genome Project, and avowed evangelical Christian. He says he finds that his students at first resist this kind of exploration and try very hard to hang on to their assumptions. But he meets their arguments with counter-arguments until they are deep into the complexities of the interplay between science and religion. And he says, eventually, if we're lucky, we achieve bewilderment. Fine, what is the relationship between religion and science? And there, in the space created by uncertainty and ambiguity, learning can begin. That space is humble, open, flexible. My students discover that I'm right there in it with them. I don't have the answers either. We work together, think things through, and as in any good class, we emerge changed, not validated. I want to repeat just a little of that. In the space created by uncertainty and ambiguity, learning can begin. That space is humble, open, flexible. We emerge changed, not validated. And that leads me to the other reason that I'm ambivalent about being here this morning. because I'm preaching yet another sermon about something that I think is really important but rarely managed to put into practice, because I'd rather be validated. Maybe the hardest thing for me about writing sermons is the way it constantly reminds me of this great chasm between who I am and who I think I should be. I'm often not willing to enter that space of ambiguity and uncertainty that Levinovitz describes, where learning can take place. If I'm really honest, I'm more interested in having other people recognize the validity of where I'm coming from and realize that I'm right. But Levinovitz is right. That makes it very hard to learn. Now, the illustration that he used about science and religion was particularly helpful to me, and it led to my choice for this morning's reading, because it sparked my memories of discovering Robert Ingersoll when I was a young college student. Ingersoll was an American lawyer and writer and orator in the mid to late 1800s. He had the nickname the Great Agnostic, and he wrote volumes defending and extolling the agnostic worldview, which, remember, was a much more daring and challenging thing to do in the 1800s than it would be now, or even when I discovered him in the early 1980s. I absolutely devoured his writing as a college student. I was so moved by his ability to claim the power of mystery and awe in the world without also claiming religious belief, because that was exactly what I was trying to do. I felt so validated by his vehemence. Let us have the courage and the candor to say, we do not know. It was just music to a defiant young Unitarian's ears. Now, over time, I came to hear some echoes of arrogance in his words. We are the courageous ones. We have the courage and the candor to say we do not know. The rest of you are just too timid and too dishonest to admit it, and you cling instead to your ridiculous belief systems. And that was kind of where I was as a Unitarian in the early 1980s. But perhaps Ingersoll didn't mean it that way. Certainly for me as a young adult, he opened a door that allowed me to claim my commitment to rationalism while also claiming the beauty and wonder and mystery of the world, which I consider religious in nature. And so perhaps he too was a bridge in his own way, at least for me, between religion and science. But I wanted to use his words for another reason as well, a more cautionary one. Because I'm often struck by the way that we Unitarian Universalists, who put such an emphasis on being willing to admit that we don't know when it comes to theology, tend to be extremely sure that we do know when it comes to everything else. We've done it consistently, even within our own movement. In fact, within our own movement, we've also been really insistent that we do know about theology, that we know the right way not to know. The early Unitarians ostracized the Transcendentalists when they came along because they were not knowing in the wrong way. We had a long stretch where humanists and theists battled over who had the right to be here. I hope that for some of you that's not even part of your memory bank, but I grew up in the thick of it. You Christians still often feel that they're not quite welcome in our midst. And we do the same thing within our own ranks when it comes to social issues, digging in our heels not only about which are the correct causes to embrace, but also about which is the correct specific methodology that must be used to do the work of any particular cause. We are so sure that we're right. We don't seem to have much capacity for bewilderment. Now, Levinovitz starts his article by affirming that bewilderment provides hope for America's ailing soul. So clearly, he believes that we need to bring this kind of openness and humility into public dialogue of all kinds. He acknowledges that it's hard and scary to move into that state of bewilderment, to be less sure that we know what we think we know. But, he argues, the resulting worldview is more useful and more beautiful because it genuinely reflects reality. That's why a synonym, he says, for bewilderment is wonder, which at least for me is not terrifying, but exhilarating. And I do think, I agree with him, wonder for me doesn't feel nearly as terrifying as bewilderment. It does feel more exhilarating, and I appreciate him giving me that lens. My sister told me years ago that when she comes up against someone whose opinion is uncomfortably different from her own, she tries to approach them with an attitude of witness and wonder. Witness, pay attention in a serious way to what the person is thinking and saying. And then wonder. Try to imagine where those thoughts and ideas are coming from, why the person feels as they do. Now, trying to understand does not mean that we end up agreeing with everyone. And Levinovitz is definitely not saying we should always agree. He says allowing bewilderment to infuse our approach to an issue does not mean we cannot have strong beliefs. We'll still have big differences of opinion on all kinds of issues. We'll still need to take stands. But he argues if we can bring some of that sense of bewilderment into a conversation with someone who disagrees with us, quote, the conversation turns into a dialogue instead of an argument. We make progress instead of war. Now, Levinovitz is talking about big issues, and in this article, he gets into religion and science, abortion, politics at every level. He sees us as a nation heading in the wrong direction, toward more and more certainty and rigidity on both sides of every issue. And even that assumes there are only two sides. And he argues that we can buck that trend if we cultivate bewilderment in ourselves and, by our own example, encourage its cultivation in others. It's a big ask, because so often I assume that the person on the other side is not going to meet me in that vulnerable place. And it feels risky to cede any ground to those people and their ideas. We feel under threat, and so we dig in our heels and we defend our side as the right side. But how is that working for us, really? Look around. Levinovitz uses the metaphor of spandex in fabric to illustrate the way that bewilderment functions in public dialogue. Think about how clothing is more resilient and more flexible, able to accommodate different shapes when you add a little spandex. As he puts it, you can still squat without ripping your pants. That's how bewilderment benefits culture. He says the fabric of our society is increasingly inflexible, brittle, fragile. Our rigid ideologies are ready to crack under the slightest pressure. But this is a democracy, and we can fight against the inertia of tyrannical certainty one person at a time. We can cultivate bewilderment in ourselves, and by our own example, encourage its cultivation in others. We can admit, with the relief of honesty, that some questions are genuinely difficult. We can reject the rigid binaries forced upon us by a sense of crisis. And we can recognize that our resistance to doing so isn't in the service of making progress, but rather a way of protecting ourselves. And then he says, I have hope for our collective soul, which, if we have the courage, can stretch and change instead of tearing itself apart. Well, I would certainly rather see us able to stretch and change than tear ourselves apart. And if it feels too daunting to jump into this discipline of bewilderment when facing the great chasms in our culture, the good news is that there is plenty of room to practice right here in this very room. Because in my experience, it's hard enough to cultivate this attitude of witness and wonder, even among the people I'm closest to, the ones I respect and appreciate. Even in a community like this that defines itself by our common values, we still hold a wide range of perspectives and experiences. Whether it's where we are on pandemic precautions, or personal theology, or a wide variety of social and political issues, we have plenty of differences among us, and we can be quick to judge and take sides even against each other. So if there's any hope of our learning to enter a state of bewilderment with folks who are very, very different from us, I think it lies in our learning right here to witness and wonder, to meet differences with curiosity rather than judgment, to be less sure that the answer is yes or no, but that perhaps it is under construction and that we can build it together. Okay, where did I put the words to the refrain to that song? Oh, I had them up here. Yeah, I could just get you to sing them again. That's worth the singing. We're going to climb this ladder rung by rung. We're going to count our blessings one by one. It's going to take a little grace and luck, because, baby, it's a long way up. Thank you for that. So I invite you to join me in search of and in praise of bewilderment. Let us at least sometimes have the courage and the candor to say we do not know and really mean it. And then maybe we can begin to learn. Thank you. And let us join in singing together hymn number not 320 as is printed in your order of service, but 323. It'll be on the screen, so you can't go wrong. Break not the circle.
Again, I'd like to thank all those who made today's worship possible. Our tech team, Don, Rob, Patrick, online host Rich, our hospitality team members, those who helped set up, Bob and Gabby for their music, and especially Reverend Libby Smith. As a reminder, if you joined us online, you can join a breakout room at the end of the service for a virtual coffee hour. For those of you in the sanctuary, please join us in the fellowship hall to greet Reverend Libby and each other.
And now, if you are comfortable taking the hand of your neighbor, I invite you to do so, or you can raise your hands in a virtual hand-holding as we say our benediction together. For those who come here
seeking God, may God go with you. Those who come embracing life, may life return your affection. And for those who come to seek a path, may way be found, and the courage to take it, step by step. Blessed be.